Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer delivered wide-ranging remarks on the Senate floor Monday. The New York Democrat commemorated the 21st anniversary of 9/11. Schumer also called on his fellow lawmakers to codify marriage equality, saying, quote, "At a time when our rights are under siege, it would be a much-needed shield for scores of Americans at risk of discrimination simply because of who they love." Schumer then discussed a potential government shutdown. To avoid a government shutdown at the end of the month, Congress must pass the continuing resolution, which funds the government. Schumer said, quote, "In order to avoid a shutdown, Senate Republicans must continue working with us to resolve the issues that remain."
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Madam President, the Senate gavels back into session to consider more federal judges, continue working to fund the government, and to find a path forward to protect marriage equality and other critical issues. Later this afternoon, the Senate will vote on the confirmation of Judge Salvador Mendoza to serve a lifetime appointment on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The child of Mexican immigrant farm workers, Mr. Mendoza was the first Latino judge to ever serve in the Eastern District of Washington, and if confirmed today, he'd be the first Latino from the state of Washington ever to sit on the Ninth Circuit. In 2014, the Senate confirmed Mr. Mendoza with an overwhelming bipartisan vote, 92-4. Today, it should be no different. If confirmed, Judge Mendoza's elevation would be significant for another reason. He would be the 80th, 8-0, judicial nomination confirmed under President Biden. That's more judges confirmed under President Biden than were confirmed by this point under President Trump, President Obama, and President Bush. It's something we Democrats are very proud of because the impact of these judges will last for years, if not decades. And we are by no means done. After Judge Mendoza is confirmed, we'll turn to the nomination of Arianna Freeman to serve as circuit judge for the Third Circuit. She'd be the fourth circuit judge nominee we'd consider since the beginning of this work period alone. Let me say that again. We're going to begin considering the Fourth Circuit Court nominee since we returned from the August state work period. I said judges would be a priority, and this is what that looks like. And it's my intention, as Majority Leader, to keep the Senate focused on judges this week and beyond. Our fundamental rights and our democracy itself depend on it. Now on marriage. Off the Senate floor, my colleagues continue to have good conversations on very important legislation to codify marriage equality into law. Far from being a theoretical exercise, codifying marriage equality would have a dramatic long-term impact on millions of people. At a time when our rights are under siege, it would be a much-needed shield for scores of Americans at risk of discrimination simply because of who they love. For many of us in this chamber, myself included, passing marriage equality would hit home in a very personal way. I want to thank my colleagues from both sides of the aisle, especially Senators Baldwin, Collins, and Sinema, for all the work they're doing to build support for marriage equality legislation. Over the past several months, I've given them the time and space they have requested to have these talks, because I want their efforts to succeed. I know their work is not yet done, and I encourage them to keep going. I truly hope, for the sake of tens of millions of Americans, that there will be at least 10 Republicans who will vote with us to pass this very important bill. We cannot forget that a mere decade ago, marriage discrimination was the law in much of the country. While we're happy that America's made a lot of progress since then, we're not naive in thinking we can't go backwards. As we saw earlier this year, it took the Supreme Court just a few weeks to unravel decades of vital precedent on women's rights, gun safety, and environmental protection. And, of course, Judge Thomas has opened the door for the court to go even further backward when he's saying that cases like Obergefell, which protect marriage equality for now, should be revisited. So when some Republicans say, oh, this is unnecessary, it won't happen, remember, that's the same thing they said about Roe. And look at where we are today. We should protect marriage equality now, well before the MAGA-controlled Supreme Court steps in. So I encourage my colleagues to continue these conversations. The American people support protecting marriage rights of same-sex marriages by a large margin. So let's get it done. Finally, on the legislative front on the CR, both parties must work together to keep the government open beyond the September 30th deadline. As my colleagues know, negotiations continue on a CR to extend funding through about mid-December, which hopefully will give appropriators enough time to draft an omnibus funding package. I thank Chairman Leahy, Ranking Member Shelby, and everyone from both sides working to keep the government open. No one wants to see a shutdown, and I know that includes my Republican colleagues. But in order to avoid a shutdown, Senate Republicans must continue working with us to resolve the issues that remain. And finally, on the 21st anniversary of the horrible day, 9/11, everywhere I go, whenever I'm wearing a suit or sport jacket, I wear this flag pin on my lapel, a small but constant reminder of a promise America made 21 years ago. Never forget. It was on that day, September 12th, 2001, that having seen the horror, smelling the death of the death in the air, hearing the horrible stories and seeing hundreds of people lined up with poignant signs that said, "Have you seen my son Bill? Have you seen my mother Mary?" Because no one knew who was alive and who wasn't. On that day, I called on Americans to wear the flag, to display it at their homes, out their windows, or at least wear it on their clothing. I've done so ever since, and every day I look at that flag, I think of the people who were lost and the vicious evil of those who perpetrated this awful act. Yesterday, I joined with the Vice President, Governor Hochul, Mayor Adams, and others to honor the fallen of September 11th, to grieve for those who were taken from us, and to affirm that over 2 decades later, though scarred and battered, our country and our democracy endure. An eternity can pass, and yet September 11th will always feel like yesterday to me. As clearly as you sit before me, Madam President, I still remember what it was like to visit the wreckage a day or two later. The destruction, the smell, the noise was nothing like the New York I knew and loved. People, as I mentioned, lined up along the sidewalks, hoisting makeshift signs that asked the unthinkable. Have you seen my daughter? Have you seen my father? Those images, as well as the people I knew who were lost, will never leave me. Yet in the midst of so much pain, on 9/11, America encountered its best self. Ordinary people banded together to do extraordinary things. Taxi drivers, store managers, businessmen, city workers, everyone in between, abandoned their day jobs and became heroes. They donated blood. They organized prayer vigils. I'll never forget the sight of a shoe store owner along the route as people escaped from the towers, handing out shoes, just depleting his entire stock so people could walk home. People volunteered their times and resources to comfort those in need and rebuild our city to new heights. And the same is true for millions across the country. And to our first responders and volunteers who worked the pile, we owe you such a special and undying measure of thanks. Among all our heroes of that time, they were among the greatest and most valiant, and many of them have paid for that with their lives, because the toxins that were in the air entered their lungs and digestive systems and caused cancers to the extent we have never known in those age groups before. That's why we've worked so hard in this chamber to help provide health care and help for those who have lost loved ones. When we say that America will never forget what happened on 9/11, we mean something far more profound than recalling the memories of that awful day. It's not a passive promise, but it's also an active one. It's why 2 months ago, the Senate worked together to pass the largest expansion of veteran health care benefits in decades, to aid the nearly 3 million service members exposed to dangerous toxins while serving in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places around the world. And it's why we must work to replenish that ground zero fund that helped pay for the health care of those who rushed to the towers. And we must replenish that fund in the near future. And it's why all of us, regardless of party, must work together to defend the American way of life, to protect our precious democracy that the terrorists tried to bring down with violent means. The world's changed dramatically since that morning that the towers fell, but the need to protect our nation from threats, foreign and domestic, remain. Today, 21 years after the worst terrorist attack on U.S. history, let us stay awake to the things we must do if we're to keep our promise to never forget. May God bless all those who died on September 11th, as well as their families, and all our first responders and service members who made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our great nation. I yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the